With the last of my smaller two demos, I want to show you snow and do a scene with watercolour and pastel and chinagraph pencil. Now this is a chinagraph pencil, very handy, slightly waxy, you can get them in different colours, not just black, and they're good out in the field because all you have to do to sharpen them is simply peel off the paper like this, and you see it spirals up and you're ready to go. Now these are slightly waterproof in that they will allow the paint to go into the pencil, but it won't wash it away. So you've got to be good with your drawing, because when you make a mark you can't rub it off with these. But for work like this they're very handy for trees and twigs. I've got my usual palette of watercolours ready, my brushes over there. I probably shan't need more than one brush for this, maybe just my little oval mop. So back down to here, and my first job is to draw all of these dark trees on with the chinagraph pencil. I'm going to use both the photographs for this, not just the one. And remember that branches grow from thick to thin. They always grow thick to thin. So when we're doing these branches, I'm going to come down, I'm going to go thicker and thicker and thicker as they come off down here, and use the pencil very heavily, make them very dark, not just grey. And we're going to just sketch in an impression of all of these twigs. There's a few darks just happening into here. Just going to do a little bit of the grey shading, but not much, because I want to do all of this with watercolour. Might do a little bit of texturing, we'll see. We may use a sponge. I always leave artwork open-ended, because if we know the outcome already, it just becomes a piece of graphics, and its value is lost a bit because we're not exploring or experimenting or moving forward at all. It's just reproducing the same old stuff. And I have done this picture before anyway, so. Okay, my basic's done. So make a few of these a little bit darker. Some of these twigs here to be stand out a bit more for the background. Right, now for our watercolour. So handy thing to carry in your box, chinagraph pencil. Take my oval mop, and again we're going to work from lights to darks, but I'm not going to leave. I could paint this totally as a watercolour. I want to make the darks complete and just work lights up and over it. So here we've got a lovely wet into wet sky, which I'm going to just coat. You see now the pencil doesn't move at all, that's the beauty of it. No movement of pencil there. Just wash over it, but as I was saying also, you can't rub it out. I'm going to just totally soak this paper right the way across. I did it in sections at first because I'm so used to doing that, but in this case I can go right the way across. Now I'm removing that waxy surface too on this practice paper that was a bit of a nuisance. There we go. Let's come back now. We'll start with our lightest colours, which are the yellows, and I'm going to have a little bit of aureolin yellow into this, coming just into here, around here. You know my favourite old aureolin yellow here, so can't resist it. Coming through there. I'm going to go to the warmer yellow, the raw sienna, bring that up and through here. And I'm letting it go the wet into wet. And I'm making it slightly darker than the picture because I'm going to want to bring these lights back into it later. Next we want the sky. So a little touch of, I think, of turquoise here, around this edge, and down here, and then straight into cerulean. Make it a bit stronger. So I want a fairly strong up here. We're going down into cobalt. Get my paint going. You see the furry effect I'm deliberately getting as well here, right the way across here. Cobalt blue. I'm going to take some cobalt violet, divide into that cobalt blue down here. right down through there. Cobalt violet, a little bit of ultramarine with the cobalt violet. And that colour I'm going to bring down into there. We're going to take some little bit of Prussian blue, a little bit of purple, a wee bit of the raw sienna there. That should give me my lovely deep purple here. Right through there, coming into here. Going to let it spread out gently. Just tickle it out there into that wet paint. And then very thinly take some of that colour and just fluff it into these clouds a bit. Like I say, we're going to let the paint be much darker than you would normally expect because we know it's going to dry slightly lighter. And I want to be able to put the pastels over the top. Come back to my cerulean down here. At the moment this is drying out quite well. Cerulean right down through here. And a little bit of rose coming down through this bit as the colours really start to flow out. Drop some of that rose into there as well. That ultramarine's coming in here as well. Round and across this field. A few marks across it just to lead the cloud furrows through there. I'm going to bring just a little bit of turquoise down here to bring my cool blues into play. Vertical strokes. Doing clear water, we're doing smooth water, vertical strokes first, like that. Works quite well. And then we go into our horizontal strokes afterwards. Really darks. I want to get these darks in with the watercolour, but look how darkly we can paint this watercolour. People think watercolour has to be all wishy-washy, but no, it doesn't. It's just getting dry enough now. It's pooling a bit there where the paper's cockling a bit, which is a slight nuisance, but I'm not too worried. Can be used such a versatile way. Right, that's all I need to do on that, and now it's just a matter of letting it dry off. And we'll pick up with the pastels over the top. But as I say, some people would be happy with that as a painting, wouldn't they? But I just want to go that stage further with you. Well, it's not completely dry, but it's dried out enough for me to work on. Let's start with a little bit of cream here, and we'll just bring across some of this cloud that's into the high up there in the sky. So we can bring in some of these lights that are here and work into them a little bit now. You might like it as it is, but as I say, I want to take it one stage further, just scumbling over the surface to give us a bit more light. So isn't it gorgeous what we can do with this now? And we start playing with other colours. So we could have left it alone, but look how we can enhance it with these colours as well. Blues and pinks coming down here. And if we want to put some darks in, we still can. So if I want to come back and just work a little bit of dark in here and there as detail, I can still do that here as well, the way that these beautiful blues. I know we've got it with the watercolour, but it's nice to be able to play it further with the pastel. Look, I can make it sparkle. It's also shining on the edges of the dewdrops are shining on the berries and the wet morning dew of the don't need to do a lot more because it was just to show you what can be done. So that's what I meant by enhancing it, by just adding to it. I think that will do that one. We'll just use the chinagraph pencil to finish it off by signing. Maybe just a little touch of very light blue here and there at the end here. Just coming into some of these. Any turquoise, I wonder, just happening in some of these cools. Just maybe a little bit of the cool blues amongst here as well. Next I'd like to move on to this little waterfall rapids coming down here. We've got reflections here, we've got texture here, we've got the use of running water here. So I want to show you how we can do that without using white at all. We're not going to use masking fluid here, but I am going to use a little bit of masking fluid just around here and on the top edges, just to show there's different masking fluid, because I haven't yet managed to show you how masking fluid really works. The previous lot was either out of date or was affected by the sunlight. So we're going to try a different one altogether, and I'll draw this out first, put the masking fluid on, and then we use different brush techniques in here to get the feeling of moving water. Right, that's all the drawing I'm going to need, just a quick sketch. And I want to bring out now these little bubbles and some of the edges here of white, just tickling them in with the end of a brush, wooden end of a brush. I want to put these little dots and dashes. So I do like the SAA dispenser, and I have used it before with success, but just sometimes that stuff seems to be affected by the sun. We're going to do some tests and see. I'm going to take some different masking fluids and test it on the various papers. A little bit as I'm doing now with this one. I mean, this is Fabio, and this is an older bottle I've got, so if this doesn't work, I don't know what's going on, because I've had this bottle a long time, so it might be out of date even. So it would be very strange if it works and the other doesn't, but we'll see. You see, I use the grey masking fluid because I can see where it's going. That's the point. Working on this 140 knot SEA watercolour practice paper, which has always been alright for me in the past. From right down to here in these areas. I'm going to use a dry brush technique here as well. I just want to put some fluid into here, just to get some sharper edges, and well, I'm going to do most of it to show you with the brush. I'm not going to use the brush end of the brush at the minute. It can mess up a brush altogether. You can get special brushes that are nylon, and the masking fluid tends to wash out of them more easily. You certainly mustn't leave it long on your brush, or it will really make a mess of them. Worst I ever had was a bottle of a well-known brand, which was a glass bottle, and the actual lid broke, and this stuff went all over the place and through my brushes, and it was absolute hell to get out. And I haven't used that particular make since. Even though it was a very well-known one, because the container wasn't the masking fluid. Masking fluid was fine, it was the containers. Right, there we go, and a little bit of white up here in the sky, I think. We'll just use my finger there as well, just to get some of these bits of light here where I want light in between the maybe one or two little bits on the branches. Okay, the masking fluid is dried well enough on here now. Something else I wanted to show you in this film was how salt works with watercolour. We can put cling film over and make effects. We can also add salt into the paint, let it dry off, and then we get a wonderful texture effect, especially for snow as well. So just in this area here, I want to put a bit of green, some various greens in there right now, put some salt on so that I can show you how that will be when it dries off, how we get these lovely effects in many other ways with watercolour as well. Just one more technique I want to show you on this very last of the smaller works before I start doing the last two major ones and the end of this series of demonstrations for you in the basics of watercolour. Right, let's just look at this area here then, and I'm going to make up some lighter, just a couple of colours of watercolour there, just to go in there to give some texturing through the background here and show you what the salt effects will do there. And I want a very pale turquoise blue there. I'm going to drop that in there like that. And that wet into wet. I'm going to take some of my aureolin yellow again, you know, my favourite aureolin yellow. I'm going to drop that into there. Before I do any more texturing, this is just to give you some of these effects of how salt will affect this. And I want some deeper green into that, a little bit of sap green, just to really show what the salt will do when it's dropped in. Now, that gives me that little area there, look. And let's drop this salt onto that, all over it. And you can see already how the salt is picking up the watercolour, and it's going to give it a leaf, or depending on the coarseness of the salt as well, of course. If the salt is very fine, you're going to get a finer mark, and heavier, you're going to get a heavier mark like this. So we'll let that bit dry off, and in the meantime we'll carry on painting the rest, just for fun, which is what painting's about, fun. Got all these greens to put in here first, and I'm going to put these darks in between. There's wet next to wet, there's hard against wet, there's all sorts going on here, but I want the light colours in first. So as we were just doing, I'm going to take some of my cooler colours. Now see, it's going over the masking fluid very nicely in this case, so I suspect this masking fluid is still alright. Right up through here with my turquoise greens. Coming down through here, just going to blob these in, because all we're doing at the moment is giving you the idea of how we can get various textures by using a sponge shortly. Down through here, a little bit of that turquoise blue. Up here, right through the masking fluid there. And then very pale, the aureolin yellow, going on all the way down in the background, down here to here. Very pale at the moment. I'm going to make it stronger as we put this wash in, right down through here. Let that aureolin come into the edges here, thinner there. I want this mottled effect of light, dappled effect of light here. It's very yellow coming down there into the edge of this. Quite thin there, very bright here, very bright here. Coming up into those leaves that come through here. Just drop a bit more of the yellow into the salt there. There we go. While I've got that on my brush, I want that yellow coming down here as well. It's the salt that I don't particularly want. Right down through here. A little bit coming through down here as well. Painting in the verticals first, so my brush strokes are vertical even with watercolour first to get smoother water like that. Now I want to go stronger into here and drop in stronger yellows before I start putting in some stronger greens. Those yellows are coming right through here and down here. Nice sunlight. Now the stronger greens, I'm going to go to my Viridian first, which is a cooler green. Drop that in. This is before I do the textures with the last greens, but I can get this mottled effect just with the brush. And look how I'm playing the warm against the cool with the greens. Now I'm going to finish this bit of glazing, this wash, so I'm going to finish this wash at this stage. All those various lovely warm greens I've got. I'm going to use the darker greens in just a moment with the sponge, but I've got to let this totally dry off first. So we'll let that just dry down there, dry off a bit. And I can start putting in some of these darks up here as well. We've got masking fluid up there already, so we've got quite a few of the lights. I can afford to let these darks just blob in here. This is my purple and my brown that I was using only just now for something else. And that should give me a lovely dark down here. And I'm going to go straight across these bits of masking fluid that I put in earlier, dot into there. Just get the feeling of these roots and things that are happening behind there. That dark bit of tree that goes up to there, right down to the reflections here. Some of those darks now can just be flicked across. We've done our verticals. Now this is business of this horizontals coming over through here. There's a masking fluid behind there now. We've got masking fluid down here, but we're going to do most of it with brushwork. And I'm going to change over now to one of my... Now I could use for this a Hake. We haven't used the Hakes yet. And this would be quite a nice place to use one. This is a Hake, a nice big hairy Hake. And if I get it wet, what we can do, you can see when it's wet, I can break up the end like that, as I can do with a fan brush as well, but I'm going to use this for the water. I'm going to start again with our lighter colours. So I'm going to start with some cadmium orange in this case. I'm just making the end of the brush a little bit drier, and I want to reflect some of that into here as well. So, and you can also use this for texture. So if I start to texture with this into these stones, for instance, I've made the end very broken look. So you can see that I can now come down into this and use the broken textures like that, or I can drag them like this. So a little bit get these lovely textures like this. So I'm deliberately using the Hake not as a wash brush but as a textural brush at the moment. To drag these bits of waterfall, as they spray down here, to drag them round to get the feeling of this water cascading over here. I'm going to add a little bit of rose to that cadmium orange. We'll start to get the feeling of these iron covered rocks, iron soaked water as it comes through here. Just come across with a couple there. Put some of the warmth into here as well. And the thing is, I've got to decide which blue. I'm going to use the cerulean blue at the moment. And again, I'm still keeping with my slightly furry ended brush as it comes down over here. Look at that lovely reflection there as it shines through. Furry ended brush here. And the light blues come through, just shining through here. So different effects, different brushes, different effects. This is why I was saying about needing more brushes personally when I'm doing watercolour than I do when I'm using other mediums. Drag it through, down there. A lot less texture there, just let the water just come through. It's Drag that through there. White there, more texturing of the water flowing down there. Drag across that way when we need to. We're getting the cascading feeling now of this water. And the brush is much wetter, so I haven't got the dry brush working so much now. I'm going to put these darker bits of stone in that are more solid into the background here. So we could use just a Hake brush and a rigger brush to do our painting, as you're beginning to see now. Don't have to have more than just a couple of brushes if we paint this in this style. To let that dry a bit, and we'll come back with some harder edges, and I'll show you about doing the sponge work up here. And I want to use this brush just to do a bit of texturing up here into the leaves. Not too much, just a little, because I'm going to show the rest of the sponge. But we can see what we can do with a Hake brush. We can do big washes, or we can do bits of texture like this. Okay, this should be dry enough to work onto now. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, come down to that area where we put the salt and just rub it away, so that hopefully you can see the sort of textures we're going to get by using salt. Should be dry enough now. You can see that that's now rubbed away, and it's left all these little salt marks here. So you can see that for snow or leaves, very effective. I will zoom out again. That was salt technique. Back down to get the whole thing in. And I'm going to come back next to showing you about a sponge. Got a nice little sea sponge here, and they come in various consistencies. You want to choose carefully. And I'm going to make a deep green. I'm going back to my Hake brush again, because I'm going to use both the Hake and the sponge. I'm going to start with the sponge. I'm going to make a nice deep rich green by using some sap green and a bit of Prussian. So I've got a warm green plus some cool going into that. And if I take my sponge now, just dip that in, I can go across here, look, twisting and using the sponge like this to make the fine leaves, or as fine as your sponge allows by the sponge you've chosen. So depending how hard you press the sponge, whatever you do, make sure you turn the sponge, because what you don't want is to be making a pattern, and if you don't turn the sponge, you'll just keep repeating, and anything repeated, of course, is a pattern. So right down into here, these little fine textures I want in the background. You can even drag the sponge slightly, look, to make grasses. We've got some grasses back here. I'm going to drag that sponge here to make these grasses. So we've got the effective grass there now as well. A bit darker back up into here. Right, I've used the sponge, I've shown you how that can work. Now I'm going to go back to my Hake brush and just break the Hake open a bit, so I can go in there and start to add larger leaves here in the foreground, especially with that. So there's my aureolin, here's my lemon yellow. I'm going to mix it neat, very little water. Got a nice broken-ended brush there now, look. Come back to my painting, and being an opaque paint, it will go over the top. I'm just going to put a bit of light into here. See how that works? A bit of those little light marks. Must be quite thick paint. Can come down through here, and I've now got the light over the dark there. Now I want to come back down to here. My darks again, so I have to wash my brush, dry it right out. But coming to the end of the painting now, before I do final work with a small round brush, pick up some of the deep colours here, and I just want to come over some of the wash I did earlier with these furry marks, because now I'm just going to put, as a glaze, the marks over the dry paint, which of course gives us a hard edge. So we're getting sharper marks just here where this water's tumbling over. So right up into here. Now I just finally need to go in with a small round brush for detail and take off the masking fluid in just a moment. And now the big test. We've got to see if this masking fluid will come away. Yes. So the Pabio, no problem at all. Comes away, look, beautifully. Wherever it is. Little spots of white, some of it up into here in the water. And now I've got to come back with my darks with a small round brush to start touching up. So that's how masking fluid works, and you can see how it should come away so easily just with a handkerchief in that case. Right, so I want to now work some harder edges into here. So I'm going to take my very deep colours and this stone, for instance, here, and the other little rocks and stones that are going on back into this sparkling water now to put in, which is rather fun, look, are absolute details. And some of those darks are coming down into here. You can see how it works. Rough against smooth, warm against cool, light against darks. Right down through into here. Big old stone that comes down just up here. All these little dark ones that are coming up into there. So that works very effectively, doesn't it? I hope you feel the same as I do. Now the tree here, the same. We need to start working some of the darks in between the leaves on this tree. Bring that tree behind there a bit more and out a bit more. What I can do then is start to look at some of these roots that are a little bit sharper here and come into the root system there. These grasses too. Now with a rigger, I'm going to take this rigger now and dip that into the very deep purple, the green, and we'll just try and bring out a couple of branches here with the rigger. We're going thick to thin and then bringing the twigs out. Again, look how effective that rigger is. And there's little twigs and things that are coming out through here. Quite a figurative piece this time, where the branches come through there, twigs come up through here, rigger brush to do this very fine work. And when we've got a little bit of that going on, these are a little bit too bright, some of them, we might take them down just a bit by using a little bit of water in a minute. I just want to bring some of these ripples through here. The feeling of, I've done the verticals, so I'm just getting the feeling of the horizontals now. So almost done there, that picture. It's rather fun. It's got a few bits to pick up, bits of rock and stone down here, few marks and blobs and dots and dashes just to get the feel of two darker areas just there. Now with a clean brush and some clean water, we just need to soften some of these lights a little. They're just a little bit too stark in places, so we'll just drag in some of the water across these lights, otherwise they're going to be too sparkly. We want them there, but we don't want them overdoing taking over the whole place. That's just taken those back a bit. And the same here, we'll just soften these down a bit. These little bits of white and foam that are here, soften the edges just a bit. Otherwise they're just too much. And look at that, isn't that gorgeous? Lovely little cascading waterfall. How to do that with the techniques I've been showing you. So we've got wet next to wet, wet into wet, wet on dry, wet next to, and so on. Textures, all different sorts of textures, warm against cools. Everything I've just shown you basically in one little picture with just a few brushes. Take a closer look at the various parts. That's where we did that's where we did all the salt work, look. Then we came across with the sponges. We used the Hake as well. We come down the picture now. You can see how we use the masking fluid here and down through here into here. Wet into wet. The wet over the dry to give sharper edges. Here as well. The Hake brush to drag down and give the waterfall effects here. And then we just soften back in again. Wet over dry here. So all the techniques basically in one picture there. And there's today's two pictures together. So very different effects, but using watercolour and pastel, watercolour and different effects.